Shelley Fabares, a teen celebrity, had it all. On the charts, her smash song Johnny Angel outperformed the Beatles. She co-starred in 3 films with Elvis. Then it all fell apart. She fell through her own floor in 1994, shattering all of her left ribs. Doctors found that her liver was being destroyed by a secret ailment. A transplant was the only alternative. She waited for 22 months without knowing if she would live or die. Everything altered with what followed. On January 19, 2044, Shelley Fabares was born in Santa Monica, California. Her mother was afflicted with Alzheimer's disease in 1988, and her father was from New Orleans. However, Shelley's parents did not have the greatest impact on her life. Her aunt was there. Before Shelley ever began, Broadway and television actress Nanette Fabray had already won 3 Emmys and a Tony. Shelley got a close-up look at what a life in show business may entail by witnessing her aunt's success. "I didn't think it was a dream. It appeared to be feasible." Shelley began modeling at the age of 3. Her mother recognized her ability. In 1947, they positioned her in front of the camera. Although she didn't continue, Shelley's older sister Nanette, also known as Smokey, did modeling. Conversely, Shelley possessed a unique quality. She had a youthful appearance for her age. This allowed her to continue portraying younger characters when other young people aged out of the industry. She had more time to be in the public eye as a result. Shelley debuted on television at the age of 10. The year was 1954. And Letter to Loretta featured her. The floodgates were opened by that one episode. She appeared in Fury, Annie Oakley, Captain Midnight, and Colgate Theater throughout the ensuing years. Then a huge opportunity presented itself. Shelley had the opportunity to perform with Paul Newman and Frank Sinatra in Producer's Showcase. That was unheard of for a child. She demonstrated her ability to handle serious material by performing in a live production of Wuthering Heights. She played a significant part in 15 episodes of Disney's Annette by 1958. Shelley was no longer merely a child performer. She was starting to gain recognition. Then came movie parts. She starred in The Girl Rush in 1955. She was able to get on a movie set even if it went unnoticed. She portrayed Susie Parker in Never Say Goodbye the next year. She was just 12, but at last her name appeared in the credits. She also appeared, albeit uncredited, in The Bad Seed and Rock Pretty Baby that same year. She played a mere teenage girl in Gene Eagles in 1957. No credit once more. It continued. She learned something from each small, frequently unnoticed part. She landed parts in Summer Love and Marjorie Morningstar in 1958. The situation was intensifying, steadily but slowly. Then the break came. At the age of 14, Shelley was cast as Mary Stone on The Donna Reed Show in 1958. Everything altered as a result. She transitioned from part-time work to full-time fame. Shelley appeared in the majority of the show's 19 episodes. She was now a teenage idol. She was no longer merely acting. She was emerging as a cultural icon. She was cast in a unique way in the play. She had previously performed on national television and sung with Frank Sinatra by the time she went to audition. For a 14-year-old, that was abnormal, but Shelley was abnormal. Since the age of 3, she had been employed. Nanette, her aunt, was already well known. She was well versed in the field. Despite her youth, she was prepared. There was more going on behind the scenes. Shelley became quite close to Donna Reed. It was almost like family, not just co-stars. Later on, Shelley compared Donna to a second mother. She was able to develop personally as well as an actress thanks to Donna. "Why don't you call me Donna instead of Miss Reed?" asked Donna one day. Shelley gasped. She was accustomed to formality because she was raised in a Catholic school. Although it took her some time to adjust, it demonstrated how close they had grown. Although Shelley Fabares never intended to pursue a career in singing, the network had other ideas in late 1961. Shelley was forced to comply when they decided her character should sing on the show. That's how she found herself in a recording booth with famous artists around her, frightened. She was flanked by actual backing singers Darlene Love and the Blossoms. Behind her were bassist Carol Kay, drummer Hal Blaine, and guitarist Glenn Campbell, legends back then. Shelley found it hard to believe. "I never could sing," she subsequently acknowledged. The producers were also aware of it. To hide her flaws, particularly in the repeated sentence, "Johnny Angel," they overflowed her voice with echo. Early in 1962, the song was included on the program. Nobody had high expectations. Shelley didn't for sure. But an interesting event occurred. Johnny Angel peaked at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 a few weeks later on April 7. For 15 weeks it remained on the chart. It also peaked at #1 in Canada and New Zealand, and topped the Cashbox chart. Fabares' rendition peaked at number 41 even in the UK, where it had already been performed by another performer. More than 1 million copies were sold. Someone who never intended to sing at all gave it a gold disc. Her voice was described as pleasant by critics, gentle and covered with echo. Some even claimed that because of its simplicity and tenderness, her rendition outperformed the experts. Perhaps it worked because it didn't sound bold or confident. Another record was hurriedly released by the label. Johnny Loves Me came out in May 1962. It chronicled the same girl's eventual victory of Johnny's heart, and was written by Barry Mann and Cynthia Wilde. Although it didn't achieve the same success, it nonetheless rose to number 7 on the adult contemporary list, and number 21 on Billboard. It peaked at number 24 in Canada. The Things We Did Last Summer, Shelley's follow-up, peaked at number 46. These tracks are all from her second album of the same name. She rarely gave live performances, which was typical of TV celebrities who later became vocalists at the time. In any case, most appearances were lip-synchronized. The sound was maintained by her producers. Soft, dreamy, and resonant. Teenagers were the target audience for the songs, and they were successful. Fans who listened to her music at the time remembered it even if it didn't last long on the charts. The albums followed. Shelley was required to release full-length records as part of her contract with Colpix Records. She released her third album, Teenage Triangle, in 1963, after releasing her first, Shelley. Behind the scenes, though, she wanted to leave. The timetable was harsh. Nowadays, most television programs produce about 22 episodes every season. For 5 years in a row, 39 was shot annually by The Donna Reed Show. Between the ages of 14 and 19, Shelley worked virtually constantly. To stay up with academics, she even had to attend classes on set. Teenagers had little freedom, because it was a factory-like grind. 5 seasons later, Shelley took a risk. She went out. Attending college was the stated motivation. However, the reality was more nuanced. She had been forced to pursue a career in music against her will. She was worn out. It was difficult for her to leave. Later seasons saw her make 7 additional appearances, but the damage was already done. She was unable to find employment for the following 4 years. Hollywood has moved on. Shelley waited. She had faith that the moment will return. And it did in the end. Shelley Fabares had only been married for 17 days when she arrived to shoot Girl Happy in 1965. Although producer Lou Adler was her new husband, she was met on set by Elvis Presley. She was initially anxious, but that changed as soon as they met. According to Shelley, it seemed as though they had known one another for ages. Something clicked, but not in a romantic sense. Elvis was already familiar with her work. She was someone he had seen on The Donna Reed Show. And he was familiar with her popular song, Johnny Angel, which peaked at number 1 in 1962. From the beginning, he put her at ease. They had a clear chemistry. It was even observed by the crew. Later, critics would argue that her innocent, gentle attitude complemented Elvis well. She portrayed Valerie Frank, a Chicago mobster's daughter in Girl Happy. Elvis was recruited to keep an eye on her while she was in Fort Lauderdale for spring break. It was an enjoyable, light film. However, it went beyond that. They were starting a genuine relationship. It was a friendship that would endure through 3 films over 3 years, not love. They reunited the next year in Spin Out, which was filmed from February 7, 1966. Portrayed Cynthia Foxhue, a pampered, wealthy girl whose father ran a racetrack. This time, Mike McCoy, played by Elvis Presley, had 3 potential romantic partners: Deborah Wally, Diane McBain, and Shelley. That might have caused awkwardness, but it didn't. Actually, Shelley's father in Spin Out was played by Carl Betts, who had previously portrayed him on The Donna Reed Show. The tension on site was reduced by that well-known face. The film was well received by viewers. The chemistry between Elvis and the women had a part in that. Each of the 3 contributed something special, and none of them diminished in his presence. For the movie, Elvis received $750,000 in addition to 40% of the earnings. That amount of money demonstrated the continued power of his name. Shelley was the only co-star who could match Anne Margaret's intensity, according to his Memphis Mafia members. It was a serious praise. Elvis's favorite had been Anne Margaret. Things had altered by 1967, when Clambake began filming. Elvis's weight had increased from 170 to 200 pounds. He was dissatisfied with his career's trajectory. The parts were becoming more predictable, and the scripts were becoming worse. He was told to lose weight by a studio boss. He began taking diet pills at that point, a habit that would follow him for years. Shelley was more than simply a co-star on the set. She was a confidante and a listener. They spent hours in changing rooms and trailers having intimate conversations. He revealed to her one day that he was getting married to Priscilla Beaulieu, something he had not disclosed to nearly anybody else. The others were in disbelief when he left the room and informed them. I told her. He trusted Shelley, even if many of them were unaware. Clambake turned out to be pivotal. Elvis was furiously angry over the movies. He had once been likened to James Dean, but he was confined to forgettable screenplays rather than significant roles. At that point, Shelley was more than simply his sidekick.
She was able to see the fractures beneath the grin and understood the
true man. Their connection remained entirely platonic, despite their strong collaboration at work. Elvis and his co-stars weren't always like that. Elvis Presley's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, frequently promoted fictitious relationships in order to increase ticket sales. In Viva Las Vegas, it collaborated with Anne Margaret and contributed to her increased notoriety. However, Shelley and Elvis did not engage in such activity. She subsequently claimed that their friendship was sincere and genuine. He was under no obligation to perform with her. There were no headlines to chase or pressure to flirt, and perhaps that's why he had such faith in her. Years later, Shelley reflected on that period with nostalgia and melancholy. She witnessed the effects of fame on him. She remarked, "I just feel sorry for what happened with him." Although she was aware that he had made some poor decisions, she could also see why. Almost suddenly, he had gone from being a 19-year-old boy from Tupelo, Mississippi, to becoming the world's biggest star. She recalled an incident that happened in the MGM cafeteria. The whole room rushed toward Elvis as he peered through the entrance. She inquired as to what it would have been like to be that boy and experience that 100 times over. He was never going to succeed. He was eroded by the demands, the loneliness, and the pressure. Since she was 3 years old, Shelley Fabares had been employed in the entertainment industry. But everything abruptly stopped in the late 1960s. She once said that after working since I was 3, she went to bed on Tuesday. After 4 years of not working, I woke up on a Wednesday morning. It was more than a dry spell. A full-blown professional crisis ensued. The upbeat persona that had initially brought her fame was out of step with the times. The audience was looking for more, and more grave. Pop culture was being shaped by politics, rebellion, and Vietnam. Shelley's charming and naive on-screen persona was ineffective. Later on, she acknowledged that she didn't take chances. She was hesitant to take a risk, and to change who she was. She said, "I should have been more aggressive." She likely lost out on several significant opportunities because of her fear, but she finally resumed her career, albeit slowly. A guest appearance on the show Mannix marked the beginning of her comeback. Although it wasn't a significant portion, it was a positive move. She continued to feature in episodes like Daniel Boone Medical Center and The Ghost and Mrs. Muir after that. They all contributed to the restoration of what she had nearly lost. She co-starred with Hank Williams Jr. in the 1968 film A Time to Sing, which was meant to help both of their careers, but didn't work out in the midst of all this turmoil. Hank played Grady Dodd, a young farmer who pursued music against his uncle's wishes, and Shelley played Amy Carter. Critics ripped apart the plot since it didn't make much sense. On IMDb, it received a meager 5.4 out of 10. Every character made choices that simply didn't add up, which one reviewer referred to as idiot plotting. Despite being produced by Sam Katzman, who had a track record of producing successful teen films, this one was a failure. Neither the critics nor the audience were impressed. Shelley took on any duty she could during these years. She darted between the guest spots. She appeared in Bracken's World, The Interns, and Lancer. Following her performance in Mannix, she starred in Love American Style, Cades County, McLeod, Owen Marshall, and Longstreet. Hollywood still recognized her as Mary Stone, the teen from the Donna Reed series, despite the other roles she portrayed. Like a shadow, that image followed her. One notable appearance was on The Rockford Files in 1974. She portrayed Jolene Hyland, a thief who had embezzled more than $4 million. Jim Rockford was recruited by her character to find $750,000. Her spouse had purchased rare stamps. It was a mature scene full of plot twists, treachery, and illegal schemes. Wasn't just the nice girl for once. She was layered, determined, and sharp. Despite demonstrating her ability to handle more adult roles, Hollywood continued to confine her. Although Shelley's career was still progressing by the early 1980s, things behind the scenes were altering even more. She never declared bankruptcy. However, there were indications of financial strain. She starred in the television film Memorial Day in 1983. She got to know Mike Farrell, the actor from MASH there. In 1984, They were married after falling in love. Soon later, they purchased a modest Sherman Oaks home. Later, Farrell referred to it as their honeymoon home. It was theirs, but it wasn't fancy. Shelley Fabares never thought that a straightforward CBS convention in 1982 would alter her life. She and Lou Adler had gone through a difficult divorce. Another well-known face at the gathering was Mike Farrell, who had recently separated from Judy Farrell. They had already met in 1970, but that encounter had been meaningless. Something clicked this time. When Mike invited her to view his photography, their informal coffee date took a more serious turn. Mike proposed a year later at a peaceful dinner at a Topanga Canyon health food restaurant. Yes, Shelley replied. On August 21, 1984, they were married in a modest ceremony at her aunt's home. Nanette Faber, an actress, was that aunt. The ensuing years were difficult. Both were parents to children from past marriages. Both were recovering from past injuries, yet they managed to make it work, slowly and silently. In 1989, Shelley was cast as Christine Armstrong on Coach, a role that would revolutionize her career. The victory came as a surprise. There were around 200 women who had tried out. Many were younger. Although ABC execs didn't think she was a good fit, producer Barry Kemp persisted. He thought Shelley had the ideal balance of strength, humor and wit. He was correct. Coach didn't get much attention at first. Only 60 seconds was its ranking. There were just 6 persons present, Shelley joked. However, after Roseanne, ABC moved it to air. Ratings soared. Millions of people were suddenly watching. Craig T. Nelson and Shelley appeared to be a perfect match on TV. However, things weren't always easy behind the scenes. Craig's behavior was erratic. Shelley's favored order. One day in episode 11, they had a lengthy conversation in her dressing room after too many retakes. 2 hours passed, the air was cleared. Their dynamic changed immediately. They had genuine on-screen chemistry. In the 100th episode of the show, which aired in May 1993, their characters got married. There was success. Received 2 1993 and 1994 Emmy nominations. Her mature career consisted only of those. The acknowledgement was delayed, but it felt fitting for someone who had begun acting at the age of 3 and had previously starred in The Donna Reed Show. She even received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Young Artist Foundation. She no longer had her best work behind her. However, everything changed in 1994, right when things were at their peak. During renovations in her home that year, Shelley slipped through a hole in the floor. Every rib on her left side was broken by the fall. She was 50 years old. The agony was excruciating. It took months to recover. She continued to work on Coach though. Everyone believed it to be a terrible accident at the time, but there was worse to come. Her doctors performed standard testing following the fall. Her levels of liver enzymes were dangerously elevated. Nobody was aware of the reason. There were more tests, more misunderstanding. Years passed before medical professionals determined that she had autoimmune hepatitis. Her liver was being attacked by her immune system. For a while, medications helped, but the harm persisted. She was constantly worn out. She occasionally slept for 20 hours every day. Mike, her husband, was concerned. In public, Shelley maintained her strength, but on the inside she was unraveling. Then the covert crisis burst in early 1999. Shelley unexpectedly experienced a severe esophageal hemorrhage at home. The vessels in her throat exploded with blood. Her trip to Cedars-Sinai was hurried. The doctors gave her the worst advice. She had a deteriorating liver. Drugs were no longer effective. Her only chance of survival was a transplant. She was added to the transplant list in April 1999. Her life was a waiting game for the following 22 months. Every day was unpredictable. She hoped each time her pager sounded. Frequently, though it was an error, she was shattered by every false alarm. She became weaker. She waited nonetheless. The call was placed on October 23, 2000, shortly after midnight. Shelley Fabares was on the transplant list for 22 long, stressful months before she finally got the word she had been waiting for. "Your liver is with us." The caller was Dr. John Veerling. The event didn't seem genuine to Shelley and her husband, actor Mike Farrell. They had previously experienced multiple false alarms, in which the transplant pager sounded but the number was incorrect. It had been terrifying each time. According to Shelley, we genuinely believed that we might pass away from stress before receiving the transplant. Shelley was not feeling well by the time the actual call arrived. She was having trouble staying awake. She later claimed that I wasn't in pain. However, I was simply exhausted. I would get thirsty in the morning, try to get up to fetch some water, then decide that I was more exhausted than thirsty, and fall back asleep. She and Mike realized then how serious things had gotten. Over 50% of those in need of liver transplants never receive one in time. Years before, her health issues had begun, and nobody had anticipated them. When Shelley's house was being built in 1994, she fell through the floor. Her left side ribs were all broken. Following the accident, doctors detected anything odd during standard tests. She had extremely high liver values. They had no explanation. Her statistics were still excessively high, but medication kept her steady for years. She then experienced a scary esophageal bleed at the beginning of 1999. Cedars-Sinai Medical Center was the first place she was taken to. That was the pivotal moment. Doctors informed her that the bleeding was caused by liver failure, that treatment was no longer sufficient, and that another bleed may be lethal. To survive, she needed a transplant. In October 2000, the procedure was ultimately carried out. Her life was saved. Her liver failure was eventually shown to be caused by an autoimmune disease, albeit the specifics of the procedure are not publicly available. It wasn't easy for her to recuperate. The body takes a while to recover from such a significant operation. She needed to regain her strength, cope with ongoing exhaustion, and bear the burden of her past experiences. Mike was what got her through it. He was Shelley's lifeline. She claimed that he attended all of the doctor's appointments. He accompanied me at every turn. This kind of pressure might cause some marriages to dissolve. Theirs didn't. It only grew more powerful. We grew closer, Shelley later remarked. Without him, I'm not sure how I would have survived. Shelley never forgot that the loss of a loved one by another family was the sole reason the transplant was possible. She once claimed to be constantly conscious of the fact that she was living on borrowed time. It had been a cruel wait. 22 months of uncertainty, hope and terror. Despite not discussing her donor in public, she frequently expressed her sincere gratitude. Emotions around organ transplantation can be complex. You're still here. However, another person isn't. She never forgot that fact. There was also a significant mental toll. Although Shelley avoided discussing PTSD in public, research indicates that 46% of liver transplant recipients suffer from significant stress following surgery. Up to 45.8% of people experience depression. Long after the physical scars have healed, many people experience anxiety. Shelley acknowledged that the encounter fundamentally altered her. I'm a different person, she added, even if things have somewhat returned to normal. My priorities and outlook on life have completely altered. She had moved on by 2003, 3 years after her transplant, but the feelings and memories remained. I am thankful for my life, my doctors and the knowledge I have gained, she stated. Above all though, I am thankful for my husband. Still, Shelley was forthright about the price. Despite all the development and strength she discovered, I wouldn't want anyone to go through this. Initially, Shelley Fabares was not an activist. Her career in movies and television made her a well-known actor. But when Alzheimer's struck her family, everything was different. Early in the 1980s, Elsa, her mother, received a diagnosis. At first, Shelley was unaware that her mother had been covertly contributing to Alzheimer's research for years. She had even expressed to Shelley's sister that she would prefer to die by suicide if she ever contracted the illness. However, it was already too late when the physicians finally diagnosed her. She couldn't recall what she had said. Elsa spent 9 arduous years fighting Alzheimer's. She passed away in 1992. Shelley was devastated by the loss. But since 1988, before her mother ever passed away, she has chosen to use her suffering as motivation. Her Alzheimer's Association volunteer work had already begun. She remained dedicated. She became a national spokesperson for them.
It was more than just awareness. Shelley's desire for change extended beyond speeches and charitable gatherings. She headed directly to Washington. She gave 4 congressional testimony between 1998 and 2004. She talked about the suffering, the necessity for support, and the need of research funding. She didn't mince words. Her remarks had an effect. Senator